and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast, everybody. I'm Alexandra Paul, and I'm here with my co-host, Dotsie Bausch. Hi,
Hello.
Dotsie.
Hi. We're back here again. We were home on Zoom last week, but you had me get a COVID test, and it was negative, so now you can hang out with me.
Yes.
It was kind of cool to get
sure.
the rite of passage of getting his first test, Kirk and I.
Great. Yes, and thank you for sending the photo.
My negative. It was oddly relieving, but I mean, it felt great. But it's you're like, oh my gosh, because I guess you could be asymptomatic. Obviously, some people are. So, yeah.
And how was it getting it stuck into the back of your nose?
It was nothing. I don't know what, for us, I just really didn't even notice it. I don't know what, I can't understand what people are talking about. It's so awful. I mean, I felt it, but it wasn't, I have a really intense gag reflex. So I was quite nervous that I was going to projectile vomit on the people sticking this thing down my throat. Seriously. But he's like, no, you'll be fine.
It was down your throat, wasn't in your nose. Ah, you didn't get the nose thing.
I did whatever they did, and
yeah,
they said they're coming down my throat, so I opened my mouth. I didn't have a choice.
Okay, well then, good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad it worked out.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch different ways to get the test, and you're negative, and so yay.
So thumbs up. Well, so I'm so excited about our guest today for many reasons. We're going to learn so much. She's done so much all over the world in the field of nutrition. But we at Switch for Good found our guest is Dr. Pamela Fergusson. And we first found her when she was quoted in this article in a Canadian outlet. And I'm just going to read it because you and our folks are going to get why we are so addicted to listening to everything she says now after I read this. In this, she said, the dairy industry associations are not health or education organizations. They are for-profit stakeholders benefiting from generations of government-sanctioned and even government-sponsored propaganda. In regards to the new partnership between Ontario's public television and Dairy Farmers Ontario to bring educational activities and resources to families, she is so passionate about disassociating dairy or really food of any kind that is directly tied to government. It's really almost impossible, in my opinion, to get good, sound science out of the people who are profiting off the very thing that they are pitching to us to eat and drink. Yeah. So,
Now that, of course, happens here in the United States because I was actually yesterday trying to figure out who's going to be enforcing in California Proposition 12. Okay, and which is that proposition that has standards about how gestational pigs, egg-laying hens, and veal calves are raised. So I go to the website of the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and the person that I think is the person who is in charge of implementing and making sure that it gets implemented properly by the farmers and facilities is basically, it said in her bio that she speaks regularly on behalf of farmers and the farming industry. And I thought, oh gosh.
This is the oversight person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the same frustration that that I had that I don't think I've necessarily spoken about this. They passed a law that in California that went into effect January 1st of 2020, so last year, that all hospitals and prisons have to have at least one plant-based option for the patients or the people that are in there. And I had a friend who had a terrible accident who was in a coma for a month and then came out of it. And I'm the one to, the angry vegan that's like, he's been vegan longer than I have, over 20 years. So I'm going, what are you pumping into his veins? Because it was full of dairy and he was aspirating and they didn't know why. So I said, maybe because, so we get it all set up so that he has a dairy-free alternative for when he had to be on a feeding tube. And then when he woke up, the hospital had absolutely no idea that this law had passed. Yeah. Right. So I thought, oh my gosh, we celebrate, oh, this is a big win. And then who puts it into place? Really, who's that oversight committee? Now let's see it implemented. And that's what, unfortunately, is sort of scary about these, because it's the very people that got us here in the first place, ag industry, and have teeny tiny veal crates and teeny tiny gestation crates and teeny tiny egg crates that are supposed to do the oversight to make sure that they're now out of all of these cages and crates. So I don't know.
Do you know what? I think I'm going to develop a relationship with whoever is
Smart.
doing oversight, because I want to see what they're doing. How are they going to do this? It's not easy, and I have some empathy because they are understaffed. But there are a lot of animal rights activists who wouldn't mind helping them if they need help checking out these farms. You know, we do it for free, and so I want to develop a relationship with that person over there at the California Department of Food and Agriculture.
Yeah, so you can check in and see how it's going, and if they need help,
exactly,
you'll be there.
I will help
you
them.
will be there. I know, you walk it in. Oh my goodness. So, your food has always been a political act, but these days it's so much more than that. It's also, as we mentioned, it's industry-sponsored government resources and well-funded lobbyists putting pressure on public officials to find ways to promote certain foods, like dairy. Now, our guest today has spoken about the relationship, like I just mentioned, between government and dairy in Canada. And she has the expertise to challenge these conventions. And I'm excited to travel through that conversation with her. She's a registered dietitian and a PhD in nutrition. She upholds a plant-based lifestyle and has worked throughout North America, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the UK. She currently maintains a private practice in British Columbia, runs everything from half marathons to ultra marathons, and is also a stellar mom to 4 plant-based kiddos. So she's busy.
Yeah, she's also a speed walker, which I wanted to ask her about because I'm fascinated by speed walking.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's
so
all
yeah.
you. Me too, though. So welcome to the podcast, Pamela. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Incredible. So let's go back to how we found you and your work in this area as it relates to nutrition and the disassociation of industry and government, and your belief that they should be completely separate and disassociated. How did this first come into your sphere of consciousness, that this was happening, that you might have something to say about it and potentially something that you can do about it?
Well, I've been aware of the relationship between lobbyists and government health guidelines for a long time. And I think we took a really big step forward in Canada in 2019 when we released our most recent Canada's Food Guide, in that Health Canada took a firm stand and said that they would be using only the science in order to inform the development of the 2019 guidelines, and they would not meet with any lobbyists. This is the first time that they've taken a firm stand like that. And of course, lobbyists were not happy about that. I think the Ministry of Agriculture was not happy about that, but Health Canada stuck to that rule, and they did release a food guide that was a major departure from what we've seen in the past. I mean, the big news, the big punchline, especially relevant to this podcast, is that dairy was removed as a food group. Previous to that, dairy had been a food group in the Canada's Food Guide, and therefore Canadians were recommended to get 2 to 3 servings per day from the dairy group. Now, dairy is not completely removed from the food guide, but it's no longer an individual group. And it's included with other high protein foods. And Health Canada takes a step further to say that Canadians should choose plant-based sources of protein more often. So dairy's in there with meats, but also with meat alternatives and beans and lentils, and soy milk as well is in there. And we are advised as Canadians to choose plant-based sources of protein more often. So that's advice that's going out to everyone, regardless if you're a vegan, vegetarian, omnivore. The shift is there. And I love the fact that this came from consulting the evidence rather than from taking into account industry lobbyist perspective. So I think that really gave a lot of hope to activists in Canada. We could see that what can happen when we look only at the scientific evidence and don't consider lobbyist position. And so that really inspired me to make a push to further advocate for the removal of lobbyists from the classroom, from health professionals, associations, because they're all over the place up here.
Mm-hmm. Who runs the dietary guidelines in Canada, right? So here it's the United States Department of Agriculture. Who runs it
so
in Canada?
Health Canada.
Okay,
here.
that's
It's
the
our
big
Department
difference.
of Health.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that's
which I think is an important distinction, and
very much.
I think a win for Canadians that it's health that's being considered as the number one criteria in terms of what goes into the food guide. Yes, I can see how if agriculture is holding the reins, so to speak, that would change the focus.
Yeah, it's strange because our committee is made up of people from Health and Human Services and the Center for Nutrition Protocol. And the committee then puts forward their report to make suggestions to the USDA, and then it goes into the United States Department of Agriculture's hands to make our dietary guidelines, which right there, that's the problem. That,
Yes, I've seen before. I have looked at your guidelines before, and I understand you just had a new set come out. And I have seen the disparity before between what's advised in the report from the scientific committee versus what's actually shared in the guidelines.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Canada is quite a few steps ahead of the United States in terms of its relationship with understanding that dairy is not a health food. But there's still, the Canadian government and the dairy industry have still paired up to influence especially children in Canada. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, this recent partnership brought it all out in the open, I think. So TV Ontario, TVO, is a publicly funded broadcaster, perhaps similar to your PBS system. And they produce a lot of educational television and materials, mostly intended for children's education. And they have a policy of not being influenced by donors. They are a not-for-profit organization, largely funded by government and with an education mandate. However, in this case, they partnered up with Dairy Farmers of Ontario to produce education materials. We all know in this current global pandemic that we're facing, education resources are under so much stress. Many people are homeschooling their children either because their schools are closed or because they've elected to homeschool their children. Teachers are working sometimes online, and so we're scrambling to have more online resources. So wonderful that people look to an educator like TVO to have trusted resources, and they have produced some lovely materials. But along with that, they also shared some materials produced by Dairy Farmers of Ontario. And unfortunately, these materials are essentially dairy propaganda. They're really an advertisement for dairy. They are not unbiased education. They are not based on Canada's Food Guide. And so this partnership was announced on Twitter by TVO. I'm sure that was part of the sponsorship deal that they had with Dairy Farmers of Ontario. This is simply part of the marketing, really, that they are being used to employ. And they received a storm in reply, not only from vegans. I mean, I think we would think right away, okay, vegan, particularly vegan parents, as I am a vegan parent, and I'm also a health professional, would be dismayed by this, to imagine that these materials might be used in our education system. But it went far beyond that. And Canadians in general were getting behind the notion that a for-profit agency, and they are actually a marketing agency. If you look on Dairy Farmers of Ontario's website, they say that they are a marketing agency with the interest of promoting dairy, Ontario dairy, that a marketing agency should not have access to our children through a trusted education provider. And it goes far beyond the TVO. Education boards, schools, dairy educators come into schools sometimes. Children will receive materials like coloring book materials or copies of the food guide with dairy farmers, sponsored by Dairy Farmers of Ontario at the bottom, that kind of thing, where we're really seeing them going after children. And also there's a milk program in a lot of schools where children can buy milk at a subsidized rate. And so in multiple ways, they are trying to advertise to our children. And this is something that many advertisers want to be able to do. Toy makers, in the past, it was cigarette companies wanting to advertise to children, get them hooked young and hooked for life. And I think Canadians are saying, no, our children are not up for sale.
Yeah, dairy is the new tobacco, as we like to say at Switch for Good. Same exact marketing tactics employed.
Right.
You also are dismayed at other large food PACs. What do we call them in Canada? We call them political action committees here, but you're also dismayed at other food conglomerates that press their agenda, even when it's a healthy vegetable. I don't know how you feel about that in schools, but certainly at the Canada Dietitians of Canada conferences, they're sponsored often by large food companies. And I think you mentioned avocados and another vegetable, and you even have an issue with that.
I really do. I really feel as health professionals that we should not be in bed with any for-profit organization. I do acknowledge that Dietitians of Canada has taken steps to very clearly acknowledge when something is a paid promotion. So I think in the past, there may have been concerns raised where it seemed that Dietitians of Canada was promoting something and it wasn't clear that it was a paid promotion. And then it seems they're promoting it simply because as dietitians, we feel this is the healthiest thing for Canadians to be eating. I understand that the association would feel that they would struggle for funds if it weren't for sponsorships. I will say that within my own practice as a dietitian in private practice and working online, I have taken a stand that I myself will not work with brands, and that includes even vegan brands. I love vegan brands. I will sometimes share my favorite brands, but if I share anything, it's simply for free because it's something I use or my family use, or because I feel this is something that's really going to benefit my clients or my following. I would never share something simply because I was paid to, because I believe as a health professional that compromises my position. So other dietitians don't feel the same way, and there are guidelines in place for if a dietitian or if the association is working with a brand, they need to clearly state that association. So I do feel if they're following the guidelines and clearly stating what they're doing, at least they're trying to be transparent. So I think transparency is one step. I would love to see these associations not happening at all. I think there was Canadian lentils, Mexican avocados, and Dairy Farmers of Canada are some I've blogged about my concerns. I mean, I'm a lentil lover. Don't get me wrong. I actually probably have at least 5 pounds of dried lentils sitting downstairs in my cupboards right now. I use them all the time and cook for my family. I love lentils. So it's not to say that I'm against lentils. I just have concerns about for-profit interests partnering with health professionals, because how can you trust our word if our word is for sale? Yeah. And then when it comes to Mexican avocados, also a wonderful food, but not a locally grown food here in Canada. Should we be heavily promoting that Canadians really start eating a lot of avocados? Certainly sometimes, but as it's not a food local to our country, maybe it's more a once in a while food than an all the time food. And as far as dairy goes, I think as we're seeing, Canada's Food Guide has moved away from promoting it as an essential food group. Why are we promoting it? When you look at Dietitians of Canada, their annual nutrition month, materials that are free for download for dietitians to use and share on social media and look very glossy and beautiful. These are paid for by sponsors. And when you look at the recipes that we're encouraged to share, you'll find that they all feature heavily the ingredients from our sponsors. So if dairy has been a sponsor, then they will be featured in, let's say, at least half the recipes. Mm-hmm. Mexican avocados also in heavily featured. And this is a concern. Is that really the healthiest thing for Canadians, or has this been bought and paid for? And I think the answer is clear.
Right. I want to ask you a question about a couple of nutrients that Big Ag tends to tout, especially dairy and the dairy board and the egg board, constantly, as if it's not available in plant-based foods. This morning, there was an article on KTLA5 in Los Angeles, and its title is "How Omega-3 Milk Helps Little Minds Shine." And they start out with saying that organic milk packs an optimal punch, the perfect combination of carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. It made me ask, for who? Because we're all very different in what
for
a perfect
calves,
combination is.
For a little
Well,
calf.
that's true. Right. Just get right down to it. As well as the essential vitamins and minerals. But then it starts to go into the importance of DHA, omega-3s, and choline. And choline, as you know, it's all the egg board talks about constantly, all day long, every day. And choline helps the brain process and store memories, and so it's important for obviously retaining knowledge. And I understand it's an important nutrient. Why are these the two that it seems to be that are on most of the headlines that Animal Ag keeps promoting and saying is best found in animal foods? Because they could pick anything. They could pick any nutrient, right? This seems to be, as of late, what they're hyper-focused on. Why and how do we get these in a plant-based diet?
Right. Well, I mean, the ones that I tend to hear the most about would be vitamin D and calcium. Those are probably the ones that I hear the most about, but absolutely, I can imagine them jumping to...
I feel like these are the new vitamin D and calcium. I'm just I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's like we've been hearing that for 30 years. And this is their new little thing of, don't forget, because it's almost like they're scaring people that they're not going to, they're going to get Alzheimer's. Because they talk very deeply about, you don't have this, you can't remember anything. And so,
Well, in terms of DHA, I wouldn't imagine dairy milk to be a particularly good source of DHA unless the cattle have been fed omega-3 rich foods. We'll see in egg production, for example, they'll say, these are omega-3 rich eggs. Well, the chickens haven't produced those omega-3s. It's simply that the chickens have been fed flax meal. And I mean, we could just eat the flax meal ourselves, the ground flax. And so that's what makes an egg rich in DHA. Here in Canada, I'm not sure I've seen that promotion of DHA rich milk, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this is something that is either an additive to the milk. So I have seen Ripple milk in Canada for a while was fortified with DHA. I don't think it is anymore, but that was an additive. It wasn't naturally occurring. And when I'm talking about Ripple, that's a pea protein based milk. It's a non-dairy milk. So I think dairy milk is not a good source of DHA unless those cows have been fed a diet rich in omega-3s, probably flax, that then the cattle have produced DHA based on their own diet. That's possible. Or the DHA may have been added like a fortification to the milk. And if that's the case, if it's a fortification, well, you could just take a DHA supplement. And wonderful that we have algae-based vegan DHA supplements now. And so we can get omega-3s from flaxseed, from walnuts. These are particularly good sources, but all nuts and seeds contain some omega-3s. And then we can take those omega-3s, which are all ALA, one particular type of omega-3, and we can translate those and produce some DHA EPA in our own bodies as humans. we're not great converters. So some vegans will elect to take a supplement, and wonderful that we're able to take a algae-based supplement now. And another important thing to remember for anyone who is taking an omega-3 from salmon, that tends to be where most omega-3 DHA supplements come from, is from salmon. If you are taking that, so salmon don't produce DHA. They are eating sea plants, algae, and therefore storing DHA in their own tissues. So they're getting it from algae. Why can't we just get it from algae? The chickens are getting it from flax. Why can't we get it from flax? So I think let's just go back to the plants and eat those things ourselves. And yes, we can get choline. You mentioned choline. We can get that on a plant-based diet. Tofu is a pretty good source, some nuts and seeds, some greens. I would say tofu is a nutrient to be cautious around, particularly if you're trying to conceive. I think that's a time to take a prenatal vitamin that contains choline. And you can get a vegan prenatal that contains choline, and then also eat a diet rich in whole plant foods. And if you eat a varied diet containing whole plant foods, you will be getting choline, and the addition of the prenatal will help you to meet your choline requirements, which are elevated in pregnancy.
Okay. It's go to the source. We've been so bamboozled. You know, you talked about your mom multiple times and her fish oil, issue or need. My mom had one for a long time too, and it's just people have no idea that the fish don't produce it. I mean, everyone would think that. That's what they have us believing.
Yeah, they do, and we have to remember what's the real source. It comes down to plants.
Right. Yeah,
so we eat animals. Their source of whatever nutrients they have has been gotten from plants.
I definitely recommend tofu. Whether you're pregnant, trying to conceive, or whatever stage of life you're at, tofu is a wonderful source of nutrients, and not to be shied away from. We hear these fear-mongering statements around the phytoestrogens in soy. That is absolutely not a concern. Phytoestrogens have a very weak estrogenic effect in the body, and really there's no evidence of any kind of risk. Even for people who have experienced breast cancer, we can enjoy a moderate intake of soy. I tend to recommend up to 2 or 3 servings per day, but actually the research shows that the safe upper limit intake of soy would be even much higher than that. So go for it with your soy milk, your edamame, your tofu, your tempeh, soy nuts, however you enjoy soy. Absolutely go for it.
Isn't it true that actually the reason tofu might be protective against cancers, especially breast cancers, estrogenic cancers, is that some of the compounds within tofu and edamame and such bind to the receptors in our body that and therefore protect us against other kinds of estrogens binding that might be more cancer causing?
Absolutely. I think there is some research to actually show some benefit for people in terms of reduction of risk for breast cancer. So I think absolutely, regardless of your history with breast cancer, your family history with breast cancer, I think please do enjoy soy. If soy is new for you, I think give it a try. Some people are a bit nervous about tofu, either because they've heard bad press around tofu, or maybe they've tasted tofu that was a bit bland before. And I would definitely encourage you to give tofu another try.
So interestingly enough, Alexandra dug up a paper that you wrote about nutrition for trans and non-binary folks. And both of us have to admit that wouldn't have ever considered that there would be different needs. Will you share what's in that paper?
Absolutely. Well, I think that the paper is intended to raise awareness among particularly health professionals that we will be encountering in our practice people who are trans, people who are non-binary. And in order to offer safe practice, we need to be sure that we are practicing in a way that allows for gender expression. For example, if we're in a physical office, ensuring that that washrooms are available that are gender neutral and that have an enclosed stall, so that people can feel safe to use them. Eliminating gender from and sex from your intake forms. Eliminating, the need to say, do you want to be addressed as Mr., Ms., these kinds of things. They're so archaic, and actually really, in order to offer safe practice for the vast majority of us working in medicine, we don't need to know what your biological sex is. It's really not relevant almost all the time. And so I think that's one message. Another message, for some people who are transgender, they may also be taking some hormones. And hormones may affect their disease risk pattern. For example, people who are taking testosterone may experience increased risk of heart disease. So we need to be particularly aware of that in the advice that we offer. Certainly a high fiber, plant-based diet would be something that is appropriate, as we know that it does reduce cardiac risk in general. But we just need to be aware that people may present with slightly different needs, both to feel safe within our practice and also that their needs may be altered based on hormones or other medications that they may be taking to assist their transition. It's important to remember that not all people who are transgender are taking hormones. And also, lastly, I think it's important to remember that the person who is transgender or non-binary, that may not actually be very central to the issue that they've come to you to speak about. So, the sort of example that often comes up is if a transgender person falls and breaks their leg, the person who's treating them in the ER doesn't need to ask whether they've had genital surgery. You know what I mean? But that's kind of the story that will sometimes come up, is that it becomes all about their transgender story, and that's really not our business as health professionals, unless the care that we're providing may be affected by where they are at. And then it's about being able to take that medical history with sensitivity and with care. So the paper was written really to health professionals, particularly nutrition health professionals, to say, these are the things that we can do in order to create safe practice. Here are some things to be aware of in your clinical practice. It's also important to remember that among transgender people, particularly among transgender youth, there's a higher incidence of depression, suicide attempts. There can be social issues like homelessness, job loss, being estranged from family. So just keeping some of those social factors in mind as well, and connecting to programs where appropriate and possible.
I think what I got from your paper was that when we hear someone's transgender, we immediately make them the other and focus on the fact that they might be taking hormones, or what gender are they, and born, and all that, instead of just looking at them like they have a heart and arteries that need to be taken care of, and a cardiovascular system, as a human. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate that. Already we know that in the medical system there are biases against people of different colors, different socioeconomic class. So it only makes sense that with transgender and non-binary, which we're just starting to become aware of as a culture, that there would be biases too. So I appreciate that you wrote this article.
Thank you. And I wanted to take a moment also then to add that there's also a large bias against people in larger bodies. So just keeping that in mind as well. And I want to put a word out to the vegan community too, that it's very important for us to recognize that vegans come in all shapes and sizes. And while eating a healthy plant-based diet, including lots of fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds, whole grains, beans and lentils, is absolutely wonderful for your health and can certainly reduce your risk of a lot of diseases. It's never appropriate to think or to say that going vegan is just going to fix all of your health problems, you know? And so I think we need to be aware of that in the plant-based and in the vegan community, to welcome all vegans, especially as we want to grow as a movement and welcome people. I think we need to recognize that vegans will come in all different socioeconomic backgrounds, ages, sizes of bodies, cultures, and all of that is absolutely wonderful. And, you know, I think we need to be careful about discriminating against anyone who wants to take up this message. And we don't own this message. This message is something that's for everyone.
Let's go to people. A lot of people do come to veganism because they want to lose weight. And you wrote a guide to losing weight on a plant-based diet, because a lot of people have a fear. They feel like they need to have heavy protein or heavy fat, low carb to lose weight. Is that something that you encounter and that you try to put people at ease with in your guide?
Absolutely. And I think within my guide, I give messages that really are focused on overall healthy eating, things that all of us can be doing to be healthy. Things like recommending that half of our plate or half our overall diet is full of fruits and veggies. Starting right there with that tip. And that's a tip that's given in Canada anyway. When you look at our Canada's Food Guide, it's now oriented as a plate, and half the plate is full of fruits and veggies. And the message is fill half your plate. Now, that can be a bit overwhelming for people, and they think, oh, I don't want to have a big salad on half of my plate with every single meal. I can't afford that, or I don't want to do that. But remember, it's really half of your overall diet. So maybe starting with a fruit smoothie in the morning, having a side salad, or starting with a soup at lunch, or putting out some hummus and cut up veggies on the table, or ending your meal with fruit, or having a snack that includes fruit. All of these things add up. We can also look at what's in the meal. So if you have a curry, or if you have a pasta, or if you have a lasagna, try doubling the vegetables that are in the recipe so that you're getting even more veggies in the sauce. Maybe blend some veggies into the sauce as well. And, you know, these are all ways that we can increase the fruits and veggies, which are going to just give us so many benefits, so full of vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients. But also, fruits and veggies do tend to be lower in calories per gram than other, and very high in fiber. So we're going to feel full from that wonderful fiber. We're feeding our microbiome with healthy fiber, which is going to help us to crave. When we feed our good bacteria, then we crave healthier food. It's a virtuous circle. And we're less likely to feel really hungry a few hours later because we're full of fiber. So that's the kind of tip that I'm giving. And really, that's a message that all of us can take on board. Half of your food from fruits and veggies. And also just thinking about the timing of your eating in the day, being mindful of cravings, responding to cravings. These are the kinds of messages that I'm giving. And I think they're things that we can all take on board and learn good lessons from. But it's absolutely not the case that in order to lose weight, we need to eat keto, or we need to eat, paleo, or these kinds of bro science diets that are so popular in gyms, trainers telling people that they need to get. So I always hear, you need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, which is actually like double what you need. It's more like 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So our trainers, unfortunately, sorry guys and gals, you have a lot to answer for there. People should be speaking to a dietitian, not to a trainer, about protein needs. And that really is putting a big stress on people's bodies. It's inflammatory to consume that much protein. Very few people, high profile athletes who are really training very intensely, lifting very heavy weights, or very intense training right before a competition for a short period of time, might need that amount of protein. And then they can reduce their protein again afterwards when they're going into more of a maintenance phase with their training. Most of us can benefit, no problem, on around 1 gram per kilogram of body weight per day. So, I mean, these kinds of messages are very dangerous, and I think people are pursuing them in the name of weight loss, but they're unfortunately inviting inflammation into their bodies at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, in my most intense training bouts, it was just 1.5 gram per kilo,
right?
Which really
right.
only ended up being like 80 or 90 a day, which
right.
was easy to get in just because I was eating so many calories.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, right? It's like you're putting so many more calories in the and Arnold said to us in the Game Changers, I mean, he was eating 250 grams of protein per day because he weighed 250 pounds, and it was something along the lines of like 36 eggs a day. And he talks about all of the stress that he put on his heart and his arteries by doing that. Right. And he's still continuously paying for it. I feel like people just don't believe that a diet or any kind of weight loss is real unless there's extreme restriction. It's just like stuck in our head that way. And I feel like there's a lot of people that just don't think that they can sort of settle their weight, settle their weight issues, and then literally, numerically kind of settle their weight on a plant-based diet. I know for me, it's just kept me the same size for ever since I started 10 years. I just, I eat a lot. I have a big appetite and I eat a lot. But like you said, I feel that cyclical nature of eating good food. And as my microbiome started changing over into good gut bacteria, that's what I crave more. And so, it's been something that's been an aspect of my freedom from my eating disorder.
Well, that's so wonderful. And thank you for sharing that story. And I think actually it's a story that's common amongst people who shift to a plant-based diet, but it's not universal. I do definitely meet people who shift to a plant-based diet and continue to struggle with weight. Yeah. That's where working with a dietitian, looking at the advice in that guide, where we can take a look, where could we shift things a little bit? I always look for the most gentle shifts, the most easy wins that people can find in their diet and in their lifestyle, instead of looking for something drastic or dramatic. And always with a focus on your health as the number one priority, never restriction to the point where you're compromising your nutritional status, of course, in service of losing weight. Yeah, right.
That's what so many people believe, that it has to be extreme, restriction, or it's just not going to work. Like you're lying to me unless it's like, it's shake for breakfast, shake for lunch, and a sensible dinner. It's
right.
Like, God, who can live like that? No, nobody.
Well, they can't. That's why they once they get to their goal weight, if they do, then they go right back. It's sad. And instead of having what you said,
again, brought to you by the people that profit off of Slim Fast. I won't say it out loud.
That and even meat and dairy and cheese, you can't. Yeah. You can't live like that. That's if you eat a lot of those, you have to restrict them. Yeah. But if you eat a lot of bountiful fruits and vegetables and whole grains, then you're able to eat so much more.
Yeah, you got more volume. That's for sure.
You what are the biggest? You mentioned that small steps is really important, and I find that too with my health coaching clients. The two things that I find most get people to fail is they want to do too big steps too fast, and they also don't plan ahead, and they think that they feel like tomorrow's going to be better, and they don't look at the obstacles that might come in their way and plan for them. So what are some of the things that you help your clients with, whether they want to eat better or lose weight or whatever their goals are, lower their cholesterol? what are some strategies that you employ with humans that you find work best when they have a goal in front of them?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is that I think we need to start small, like you said. I like to try to tie a new habit onto a keystone habit. So, keystone habits are habits that we just naturally do every day, like brushing your teeth or having a coffee or something. I'm going to be honest here. I will tell you about something I'm trying to do myself right now. That I never drank any coffee until I was in my 40s. And then I became a mom of 4 and I started drinking coffee because I'm, running a business and trying to train and do all the things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go for it. Coffee it is. And I have to say, I do love having a coffee now. And then I was thinking, I have come up to 3 coffees a day now. And I was thinking, do I want to try to cut that back, maybe 1 coffee a day, or maybe cut it out entirely? And I thought, instead I'm going to use this coffee habit that I have in order to, I'm going to use it as a keystone habit, and I'm going to tie other healthy habits that I want to integrate into my day to my coffee. So now before I have my coffee, I drink 500 mils of water in the morning, 250 in the afternoon, and I do a 10-minute stretch and strengthening routine before each one. So I just find this to be so helpful now that I'm working at home. I find, I used to just have much more natural movement in the day before COVID. Now that I'm home more, I'm finding it can be easy to be at the desk for long periods of time. But instead, now I'm integrating when I'm going to go have my coffee. Before I have the coffee, I take a break. I do my stretch and strengthen. I hydrate, do a little body check-in. And so I try to use these kinds of systems with my clients as well. What habits are you already doing that you already enjoy that we could attach a new habit onto? So that's a keystone habit. Starting the day well, I think, is a really good thing to do as well. I think if we start the day with some hydration and some movement and some positive journaling, perhaps, then continuing in a positive way throughout the day tends to be easier as well. And definitely, I have to agree with you, planning ahead is so key. I'm not a person who uses meal prep, and hats off to the people who do, but where on Sunday they go through and prep like every single breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack for the whole meal, for the whole week, and they stuff their fridge full of little containers. I'm not that person, but I do love to work with my clients so that they'll meal prep, say 2 or even 3 full meals. So they'll have a soup ready to go in the fridge that's packed full of veggies. I just before this, I had multiple appointments today, and I went down to the fridge, what's just ready to go? And I had a roasted cauliflower coconut curry soup there, and was able to just heat it up and eat it. And, and I feel energized and happy rather than like crashing after this and just reaching for something that's less healthy. So I think that bit of pre-prep is so important.
I wasn't nearly like brilliant or clairvoyant enough to know that I was attaching a small habit to a keystone habit. But about 2 years ago, I started drinking a large mason jar of fresh lemon water before the morning coffee. And all it connected with me was just like, I know this is something I'll do every day because I drink a cup of coffee and love it and enjoy it. And so it was just like, I just know this will happen because I do the one thing without thinking. So the other one is just going to come before it. But something I found really fascinating. You wrote a recipe book on sunflower seeds, and you did a post on that went viral about the ethical, the environmental, and the budgetary reasons to choose them for cooking over cashews.
Yes. Well, I think anyone who's poked around the vegan cooking world has come across the idea of cashew cream, using raw cashews in desserts or sauces in place of dairy cream. So making, for example, like a cashew Alfredo absolutely delicious, decadent, creamy sauces that are every bit as delicious as dairy sauces and so much healthier for you. However, I think we can do one better with sunflower seeds for multiple reasons. First of all, I mean, I have 4 children. As I said, I'm always looking at the cost of feeding them on a plant-based diet. And sunflower seeds cost around a quarter of what cashews cost. So I think a lot of people will appreciate the benefit in terms of their budget. The environmental wins are clear. Sunflowers do not need to be irrigated to grow. They grow simply through water that falls from the sky in the form of rain. They don't require irrigation, where cashews are a crop that are frequently irrigated and are quite a thirsty crop, so they have a fairly high water footprint. We can't grow cashews in North America, or maybe I shouldn't say can't, but we really don't. We tend to import our cashews from tropical countries. So then we're adding in the cost in terms of the environment and greenhouse gases of transporting the nuts into North America, when instead we could simply use sunflower seeds, which are grown here. And then there is an ethical issue as well, which I think a lot of people wouldn't have heard about, but people still hand shell cashews. That's really the way that they're harvested. It tends to be women who do this work, or sometimes it's done through prison labor. And they shell the cashews. And unfortunately, the inside of the shell of the cashew has a substance that is similar to poison ivy. And over time, over days of doing this work, and these people are usually paid in piecework, so they're paid for the number of cashews that they actually manage to shell. So they're shelling a lot of them over the space of a day, weeks, months of doing this labor. And over time, with exposure to that substance, they burn their hands. And unfortunately, I've seen photos of people with their skin very damaged from working with cashews. So it's wonderful to have an opportunity to use sunflower seeds instead, where we don't have that ethical issue where we're exposing workers to unsafe conditions. So in terms of nutrition, sunflowers are a real win. They're actually a little higher in protein and lower in carbs. Not that we really need to worry about the carbs in cashews, but they are higher in protein. But really, although, both cashews and sunflower seeds are very good for us nutritionally, but certainly when you taste a sauce made with sunflower seeds instead of made with cashews, I'm going to say that you may even prefer the sunflower seed taste, because sometimes I'll hear people tasting a cashew sauce and finding it taste almost a bit sweet, like an Alfredo. Cashews have a natural sweetness, especially raw cashews, which is what you use. You use raw sunflower seeds or cashews. They have a natural sweetness. And sometimes there's a bit of a sweetness that comes across in the Alfredo. And that's something that we aren't expecting to have in the sauces. And so I think the sunflower seeds actually translate even better in that they have a more sort of nutty, savory flavor that I think really goes well in any savory applications. Cashews are probably still the winner when it comes to desserts. You can make vegan desserts using sunflower seeds, but I'm going to admit that cashews win out there.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much.
I love them. I think when they're raw, when you just eat them raw by themselves, cashews and sunflower seeds, they taste like really very similar.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. Yeah, but sunflower seeds are on the top of like every salad I eat. They're so delish.
So good and so inexpensive. I mean, really, better. Let's just put a word out for seeds in general. Like, we're talking today about giving up dairy. Well, how about trying some sesame seeds, some tahini, in terms of the calcium and protein boost that you're going to get from that. Seeds are so inexpensive and they're absolute nutrition powerhouses. I mean, seeds are literally intended to grow a plant. And so they have all that nutrition that's needed to grow a plant packed right into the seed. So why wouldn't we want to have that win for ourselves, you know, to take in all those wonderful nutrients? And they tend to cost around, you know, a quarter or half what nuts do, but have very similar nutritional profiles. So please do, you know, flax seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, hemp hearts, so many wonderful options, chia seeds. Add these daily. I'd recommend at least 2 tablespoons of seeds daily. And, you know, you can even do that several times throughout the day, sprinkled on your bowls, on your oatmeal, sprinkled, you know, in your sauces. Make pesto using seeds instead of nuts. I mean, so many options.
The best description I've ever heard of why they're so bountiful in nutrients, because they grow a plant.
Pamela, you and I both were inspired to become vegetarian by reading Diet for a Small Planet. So we have that in common, which I was really excited to read. I actually talked to someone this morning who also had that same book as an inspiration. So it's definitely kind of what Game Changers will be to a lot of people too, the trigger. But one thing about that you do that I don't know anything about is speed walking. I see people walking. I can no longer run because I had surgery on one of my knees, and but I really love walking. I don't speed walk though. And I'm asking this question because now with COVID and gyms closed and people wanting to get a workout, it is an alternative for folks who can't run. Is that true? Can you tell us?
Absolutely.
Tell us the mechanics of it, because it's not just walking fast.
So I will admit to not being like a professional speed walker. However, I did win the walking portion of the Toronto Marathon one year. So, you know, I have some ground to stand on here, I suppose, in terms of advising people to try out speed walking. But what I did is I just learned watching YouTube. I watched some YouTube advice on actually how to, you know, you do like swing your hips and you put your feet one in front of the other, and you can actually achieve a very fast pace. For me, it's not quite as fast as my running pace, but it's certainly as much faster than my power walking pace. And like you, I had some chronic hip pain. I mean, my location of my pain was different, but I switched away from running because I kind of just kept injuring myself. I kept thinking, okay, I've got it now, I can run. And then I would injure myself again, and then I would miss being out there running. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try speed walking instead. And now I do some power walking, some speed walking. I don't always speed walk. Sometimes I just power walk. But and I do a lot of yoga now as well. I've sort of switched up the different things that I love to do. I've done some ice swimming here as well in Canada, like getting into like freezing cold lakes and swimming. So that's one that maybe won't take off in California. But but anyway, I do encourage you, if you have struggled with recurrent injuries from running and you've tried all the physio and all the different options and you kind of still can't sort it out, or even just if you think speed walking might be a fun idea, I encourage you just get out there and give it a try. Have a look on YouTube for some advice, or if you can find a local club once restrictions are lifted, and find a coach who will work with you and give you some advice on how to get your form, because form is quite important in terms of achieving the speed, but you'll get a great workout from it. Absolutely fantastic cardio workout.
I'm totally going to check it out because I'm like a power walker, mad woman. So might have shifted up a notch.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't get a high from walking and that I did from running. And so I still mourn
maybe the speed
running. And so the speed walking might help that.
I think so. It is a little closer to the kind of endorphin release that you get from running, I would say. Yes.
Okay. And then we can race.
And you'll win, Dotsie.
No, I have no idea how to do this. I'm going to YouTube.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fergusson, for being on our show. We really appreciate it. You've been such a font of information on so many different topics.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here, and I'd be delighted to come back anytime.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.